So I just want to check in, and I've been thinking about this a lot based on recent conversations that are being shared within networking and community spaces with women, with creative people, with folk that are working in the arts, and within communities where there is a platform and a dialogue and a safe space to talk about our collective trajectory and spiritual evolution as a society, in an attempt to be able to move forward together towards a timeline that feels supportive, nourishing, equal, and transformative and healing, essentially. And through this process and through the current circumstances that we are all in, many of us are extremely limited and restricted in our movement. And those of us that are would tend to be towards the end of the spectrum that is at the most disadvantaged socio-economically speaking. And there's been a lot of discussion around mental health and what the fallout of this is going to be. And whilst there may not be material resources, and whilst there may be more hardship, and whilst there may be more stress and tension, and whilst there may be, perhaps statistically speaking, more dependency issues related to drug and alcohol abuse, we have to look at why that is and be really, really careful that we don't lump together all the poor folk over there that are really struggling, that are all, junkies, alcoholics and addicts, and being really careful that we do not isolate and dismiss that group who are already, by a broader societal standard, being kind of kicked to the curb, as it were, and recognise that many of the folk, and I really want to emphasise that word folk, these people who have origins in a more humble existence because of their socio-economic status. These folk are resilient, these folk are hard, these folk are strong, these folk have to rely on community and rely on each other for support. And if you haven't noticed at the moment what is going on in the political playing field is cultural genocide, where the resources that actually keep us going and keep us connected as a creator and a musician, absolutely, music, great, yes, I use Spotify, yes, I use YouTube, things like that. That doesn't keep me going. What keeps me going is real connection and dialogue and a sense of community in a space that feels safe, in a space that has some cultural identity and some root that is actually tapping into the ground, that helps me feel like I'm a part of something and that I exist and that I can contribute to the space and be understood and have exchanges with people. That is fundamentally what keeps most of us steadfast. And when you don't have very much in the material sense, you're resourceful. Yes, you may also be suffering stress and anxiety and a whole host of other health-related problems that are a consequence of this competitive, hierarchical disparity that exists and as part of a machine that's actually designed to create a consciousness that will create division and make you feel that your story and your narrative and your way of operating is not worthy, or it doesn't matter, or that it is not rich. And can we compare that to a space that has more than an abundance of material resources and opportunities to engage with many things at the click of a button, at the touch of one's fingers, and the difference between the consciousness of a healthy abundance, which is in bearing in relationship to everything else, and about balance and harmony, and about an equal energy exchange of contributing something to the space and getting something back, and that which is born out of a lack of connection to the origin of these objects and how they've come to be and how one has come to acquire them, and a sense of entitlement and a sense of greed. And that is the narrative that is being pushed right now, and the folk narrative is being suppressed. And it is my absolute deep prayer that for folk who are in a situation where they're having to lodge up with their granny, auntie, mum, dad, siblings, whoever, for folk that are in dynamics and situations where, say, there isn't an abundance of resources so that they can have their own little safe space for themselves, just to care for themselves as best they can and to hide away if that's what they feel they need to do, but that actually we use this time, that we use it to be doing our construction of reality and our creation of our own healing modalities in our units, in our family groups, in our communities, with our neighbours. Perhaps that we have lost a little bit of that, and perhaps that at this time, normal things that one wouldn't even think about in terms of gestures of generosity, reciprocity and sharing have been cauterated by this current dynamic. So folk who were genuinely surviving by the good grace of other people, those voices are completely non-existent within the current dialogue. They just don't exist. And we're talking about a level of cultural fascism here which is absolutely attempting to eradicate any remnants of society and community as we, the people, define it. And that is something that I hope is in some way present around the dinner table or around the fire or in the park or wherever it is that people are meeting in small groups, continuing to connect with each other, continuing to dialogue, continuing to use the impetus to survive that has come about through this space of restriction and suppression to actually create a small channel, create an opening and find an outlet, and to focus absolutely all of that will to get to a place where we can be emotionally and mentally stable again, because that is what feels to be the sickness that we are all experiencing as a society right now, is that we are unwell and we are diseased. And these terms are thrown around a lot, but now I think at this stage never have they been so poignant and potent. And for as much as every struggle in the family dynamics that we hold and the collective traumas that we continue to experience and replay through our lineages and through our ancestral makeup and through power and equality balance between people that we live with, triggered by the current collective wounds of inequality between men and women, inequality between different racial groups and places of origin, and beyond. There are many more problems that are essentially causal factors connected to these two very, very big subjects. And I can say for sure that coming into your clan group, whatever that is for you and wherever you are, and whatever that looks right now, could be you and a partner, it could be you and your cat, it could be you and your parents or your immediate neighbours. Bringing your problems, worries, traumas, ideas, inspirations, everything into that space, into that melting pot, that close to home, is hard work. It is sometimes messy. It is definitely triggering for yourself, for others involved. But that was how it was done. That's how it has been done. And that is what has been stamped out with the thumb, with the boot. And these fires that we have burned for so long, and these sacred spaces that we come around to do our healing work, that is a birthright. That absolutely must not be eradicated or taken away. And there's the analogy and the literal sense of the fires being put out. No, you can't have that. You can't do that. And deconstruction of the importance and relevance of that, and the complete misunderstanding, which could be born out of ignorance or it could be born out of a lack of empathy. But I don't think that we can really afford to waste any more time in a space of thinking, well, it could be ignorance, because there has been ample time for folk to be educated as to these modalities practices, rituals and ceremonies that are actually essential to cycles of life, death and rebirth and keep us going. And the time now is not to be in that space of feeling like I must give everything of my energy, to stretch my imagination to think that maybe they just don't understand. It's abundantly clear that in the cuts and agenda that is being continued to be delivered and propagated as an idea comes absolutely with an awareness that the metaphorical fire, so to speak, is the way that we stay connected with each other, the way that we come into a space of equality and healing. You know, what do you do around the fire? You make food, you warm yourself, you dry your clothes, you make tools, you tell stories, you dream and you communicate with your ancestors. And the fear that lies within those practices from the perspective of someone who's trying to suppress those and say that they're not relevant or that they don't exist or that they are primordial and that evolution has negated now a need for that. I completely reject that from an emotional, intellectual, psychological, social, spiritual perspective. I just completely reject it. It does not sit right with me. It leaves a bad taste in my mouth. And yes, they have absolutely every right to be fearful of what can happen when we come into those community spaces and dream together and make plans and get organised, because that is the time that we're in right now, is the space of organisation and gathering resources and continuing to tell stories. But the stories that we're telling now that need to be told, these are the ones that are paving the future. And the communication that I am having with my ancestors is, oh my goodness, the time is now. Do not wait, do not hesitate, move forward with your strength, with your intuition, with your connections. Utilize that, exercise that right. And the fierceness and the strength and the power that those dialogues are giving me is unreal. And it's time to rally the troops, so to speak. Whatever that means for you in your heart of hearts, and with an intention of healing and compassion for others, you will know what to do with that information, and it will ignite you, it will fire you up, and you will know what to do, and you will know who to speak to, and you will know the next steps that you need to take. And being lit up with that fire is your birthright. And don't let anyone take that away from you. And if someone tries, you tell them no. And you continue going your way. And you continue forging your path. And that is what is scaring these people, because then they don't have control. And then their narrative does not exist anymore. They become irrelevant because they don't fit into this paradigm. They don't fit into this shared space of equality and of openness and of community. They're trying to destroy it. So, good luck, and see you all in a field somewhere, I hope.